Welcome to Talk Commerce. We talk about how merchants, agencies, and developers experience commerce. This week, we interview Erik Erway with Adobe. We discuss PWA Studio and how big merchants are adopting and using it. We talk about how vibrant our Magento community continues to be. And Erik gives us the lowdown on the local meetup scene in Austin, Texas with Shipper HQ. Erik tells us how merchants will save money and get ROI from their PWA Studio installs. And finally, Erik balks at the chance to present in person in Minneapolis in January, but gets excited about Disney World in Orlando, Florida for an Adobe Hackathon in 2022. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. This episode is sponsored by Erway Corporation, the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions. An AWS Select Consulting partner. Erway Corporation. Forward together. My name is Brent Peterson, and I'm your host. Please remember to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. And now, Talk Commerce. Welcome to Talk Commerce. I have Erik Erway here from Adobe. Erik, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit of what you do, and what's your current passion?
Great. Brent, great. Can we do a redo here? Sorry, I tripped up.
Yeah, no problem.
Right.
Welcome to Talk.
We'll cut that.
Yeah, we'll edit this front part out. Welcome to Talk Commerce. Well, we'll do it one more time. Welcome to Talk Commerce. Today I have Erik Erway from Adobe. Jeez, now we got ourselves all tripped up. All right, we'll do one more tack.
All right,
yeah, we'll have a bunch of bloopers.
There we go. All right.
Welcome to this episode of Talk Commerce. I'm very excited to have Erik Erway, direct from Austin, Texas, and the Adobe headquarters, not headquarters, but the Adobe offices down in Austin, Texas. Erik, introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and a little bit about some passions that you have right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Brent. So great to see you, by the way. And so my name is Erik Erway. I'm the group product manager for what we call our merchant and shopping experiences here at Adobe Commerce. And so I've been with Magento, now Adobe, for well over 6 years. And as far as passions, I think in many ways the community is my passion. But outside of this, you've been spending a lot of great time with my family, especially in the past year or so. With a lot of activities, but boating and things like that. Just trying to get outside and enjoying as much as we can. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much again for having me, and looking forward to talking commerce here.
Great, yeah. So let's just dive into some of the Adobe things that are going on, and I know that you are known as the PWA guy at Adobe. So let's talk a little bit about PWA, and then we can go into some. I'd love to talk a little bit about Magento community and how that's doing, and just in wherever in your role change, or what is your role now? Let's talk a little bit about that as well. So let's start with PWA. Sure. Tell us how we're doing on PWA.
We're doing good. I think a couple things on our side here, and we've really grown to where we started off with PWA with James Zetlin and team roughly 2-3 years ago into a mature product. And so for those who don't know her, Elena Tekcheva on my team now is leading the PWA efforts, and we've really kind of gone more, I would say, breadth versus depth on what we're offering into the market, and we're starting to see more complexity in terms of the types of launches that we're seeing today. Some rather large household names, and really starting to kind of push the limits on what essentially was a great, I would say, developer experience that built off everything we did with 2.3, the GraphQL coverage inherent with that, but really have started to see some great efforts around from the partners who've extended that, often build their own accelerators, even better, even brought back and contributed back. We've got some great maintainers with Lars and Jordan who really can continue to drive the change. And so I think that kind of runs hand in hand in many ways with the community. And so as you know, and I think others know, I took a more active role with the Magento Association back in January with some of the changes. And I'm really encouraged by the momentum that's happening within there. We've got a really strong, but I think an avid base, and in many ways you'll see just some of the higher points and some of the more visible points with the association. But as I've gotten more involved, we've got some really great, great in some cases new faces that have helped, I think, drive really that connection and heartbeat for the community. So I'm really encouraged by that. It is all very related. It's more than just PWA, which the longer form of this is more about a capability or standard. It's really just a subset of headless. It's in many ways for us though, it's the future. It's the future of Magento, the future of Adobe Commerce, and we're creating some really great experiences together with and as part of Adobe as part of this. But it's been a multi-year journey, and it's been encouraging, and I think the launch has continued to help us understand, help us shape the product. But none of this would be possible without the 2,000 or so that we've had from the community that have driven really the product feedback and our ability really in kind of creating this product out in the open from the very beginning.
Yeah, and Lars was an earlier guest of mine, and he is very
Yep.
passionate and excited about the product. And from a technical standpoint, I know that he is working very hard behind the scenes, making a lot of these solutions work. You mentioned some of the new product launches. Is there, from a merchant point of view, why would a merchant want to look at PWA over something out of the box from Magento, or not out of this is out of the box, I understand, but
Yeah.
without doing the PWA solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the two biggest reasons, in my opinion, are around flexibility and then really around extensibility. And so when you think about flexibility, the ability, as you've talked to some of the earlier adopters around changing and making updates to, and again, making that point of need change, I think that flexibility has been super, super helpful. And so what I mean by that is that with some of the earlier launches, though, changes that often would take weeks, sometimes months, or really just a matter of days, because you're really changing that front end. Now, so much of that really though is a headless offering, and so much of what we're doing is really as a superset, creating a headless, really a storefront for Magento as a whole. But the experience piece is really where it's at, and so much of what we're talking about and can be highly measured. And you look at the performance characteristics of PWA as being a really strong piece of this, but there really are some great experiences that we're starting to see around enhanced offline experiences. Certainly things like push notifications, which continue to advance across the devices. But I think what we're really trying to look at is finding ways to activate capabilities that are in your devices, so both browser, both desktop and mobile. Activate those in a way that we can start taking advantage of those. And there's some really great things like Bluetooth, certainly payment requests and other areas that PWA inherently, because it's really just taking the beginnings of those capabilities, allow you to bring those to life. And what we're trying to do with Venya and these others is create really a basic starting point for any one of these. But we're going to need the help of the ecosystem. We're going to need the help of the Magento community, Adobe, et cetera, to start really extending and creating some interesting examples along the way. So yeah, I think again, the TLDR, I think it's really been really around that agility and extensibility, but really the experience. And it's more than just performance. There's a lot of great high performance options that are out there, which is fantastic, but really playing into really the two strengths that we've had, certainly with Magento, now Adobe. This gives us a unique offering into the market.
Yeah, I think too, from an agency point of view, looking at the type of developer that needs to develop on this, they should be a React developer. But I think the other thing is that you can bring on a React developer and they should be ready to go fairly quickly on delivering this solution. It's not something that would take a typical React developer months and months and months to try to get under under their belt and try to understand. This is
Right.
this is something is very straightforward for that developer and can get teams running and onboarded quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you think about the history of Magento, we've had a long relationship with like the PHP community. I think one of my desires is figuring out how do we tap more into the larger React community. I think some of our more active active community participants, Jordan included, came from that React base into Magento. And so I think for us, when we've kind of changed things up a bit and really understanding kind of what problem you're trying to solve, these are the things that Zetlin had taking great care in, and making sure that experience really is familiar and really is understandable, but from an audience that may not know full stack Magento. But it's a big change, right? But I think you're right. I think understanding and really looking at it from the front end down is really a great way to get started with this.
And I think too, I mean, not to get into a lot of technical stuff, but it may seem complicated on the front, but for myself, who is a non-developer who sometimes who does development things, I was able to get the Venia theme running on my local machine using Valet
Yep.
Plus in probably 30 minutes. So
Yep.
it is not difficult. And so your typical developers in that scenario would get it done in 5 minutes or something, where maybe it
Right.
takes me 10 times longer, but also I'm not doing that every day. So I think, from an agency standpoint, and I know that one of the things that we need to do is get more agencies on board to get
Right.
excited about this solution. And then the next thing we need to do is get more developers into the ecosystem to start developing and doing this. So, just to kind of put out that point that this isn't super complicated, and it is
Right.
something that people can understand and do.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. I had the same test for myself, being a former developer, gosh, way too long ago. But I think, as a mark for the team, we want to be able to set this up in a matter of minutes. And so if you, in the case of having your own Magento 2 instance and the sandbox that's on our documentation, you should be able to do it in just a few minutes, which is great. And so we want to allow for that experimentation, really getting past that the setup, the provisioning, et cetera, and that really just encourages adoption, encourages partners to kind of break past maybe some of the newness of what we're trying to do, but even look at examples and really pushing what is a fairly just functional example that we have out there in Venia into some really new and interesting experiences. That's where we want to see this. This is ultimately a play into more dynamic, richer, superior shopping experiences versus kind of the static commerce platforms and commerce experiences that we had to date, which have served us very well. But in many ways, that flexibility is really a big advantage.
Yeah, I also kind of want to drill into the idea that that because this is headless doesn't necessarily have to mean that it is more complicated than
Right.
a traditional monolith instance of Magento, in the sense that you have to modify your theme regardless, and however you deploy that theme is independent of whether you have to modify it or not.
Right.
And you're still going to have to deploy something, and this allows you to keep Magento separate and just deploy the front end instead of having to deploy everything all at once. So can you kind of okay, I want to try to view this from the merchant standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give the merchant an idea of how it's really not that different once you put your head around it and decide, oh, okay, I'm going to have two different deployments instead of one? Is that a good way to look at it?
Yeah, and I think you can, it's a great point. I mean, when we talk about the agility of this, and this is just headless overall, you're the time it takes to make these changes are often taking days or weeks in the case of very large, complex ones, versus months, right? Where you have to worry about the full deployment. You have to worry about what version necessarily of Magento 2 do you have on the back end, and we're seeing a lot of those examples with some of our first launches that have had to make, and there's a pretty good example in the UK where they had to make like significant changes to a custom workflow on the React side, on the front end side, and that would have taken months. And in many cases, in their case, it only took a matter of weeks, and that was like a large rewrite that was much easier, much simpler with the flexibility of these modern front end platforms. And so That's really what you're trying to unlock. And as a merchant, you're looking at cost, you're obviously looking at conversion, but you're also looking at the time it takes to make some of these changes, certainly at the developer layer. And then the other part too that we've taken into kind of great care is the content and authoring experience, so the ability to make changes as a merchant using things like Page Builder and others that have long been, long been compatible for, well, with PWA Studio and Venia for over a year. So we look at a lot of those and really get back to the roles that are involved with that. But from a merchant standpoint, they're going to get changes faster, and they're going to be able to push the limits of the templates, so to speak, or really the experience there, and do some interesting experimentation.
Yeah, and I think some practical things to look at, or some real world things to look at, would be you don't redeploy your PHP, and you don't redeploy your MySQL, and you don't redeploy all these other peripheral features that are part of it. And now we don't redeploy Adobe Live Search or Elasticsearch or whatever those other things are that are a requirement or attached to Magento. And this is just we're not in this case, we're not necessarily going to have to redeploy Magento. We'd only redeploy that front end piece that we're modifying. And I think what you're saying in that rewrite case is that because we didn't have to worry about the part of Magento itself, we were able to just redeploy the front end without having to worry about QAing, UATing, all those other pieces that are part of it, that in a monolith, as your system gets bigger and more complicated, it then gets bigger and more complicated to make sure that everything is working.
It does. It does. And so I think, and again, with that flexibility comes great responsibility. And I think that's where the tooling that we started off with things like PWA Studio and get a lot of feedback and some ideas from the community have helped shape that, right? Because it is, it's a big change, but and that's what separates really and we've got some great, pretty sizable customers that have gone fully headless with React, and they have their own front end teams, and it's worked out well for them. But it then comes down to, what can we provide more out of the box to make that easier? I mean, the perfect example that we've often shared with customers is Starbucks, and so they were one of the first, if not the biggest PWA that was done, years ago, right when PWAs were first mentioned and discussed. They did it all themselves. It's fantastic. It must have cost millions for them to create it and kind of build that in a very custom way. And so, building upon a commerce platform like Magento, they get you half of the way there if you're not already doing it themselves, and then going kind of further up the stack into the components, the hooks, etc., that are they're really the base of what we're creating here, make that easier. So ultimately, we're looking at in a world where we're trying to reduce that overall cost, i.e. customization, but when that needs to happen, it's a lot less daunting than I think people anticipate. And so I think there are those breakthrough moments with new developers, new partners, and new merchants, and say, hey, this is just React. This actually is pretty straightforward. I know that it's the it's the situations where maybe somebody in a team or a partner may be learning React for the very first time, where it's like, ooh, this is a change. I'm going to have to learn this. This isn't how I remember this, and that's okay. There's a lot of resources that are out there. Yissa does a fantastic job with Uriel on some of the trainings he's doing on that side of the fence, and so those things will help people get ready for what is it's an okay change, but it's a change nonetheless, and we understand that.
Yeah, and I just also, Yissa and I did another follow-up interview and did discuss some of these points and discuss some of these different intricacies. I'm not going to try to say the word again. Never mind. That we discussed some of those finer points that were involved in the different developer types. So a traditional Magento developer would find it a little bit more challenging to move into React. And the same goes the other way around, where a React developer would find it more challenging to do XML layouts and all the other things that are involved in a traditional theme. So it really is committing to a team or committing to a way of doing it and then doing it in that way. And I think one good point you brought up is that Starbucks is on a PWA. It's on React, I think, and having that ability to do those small changes or big changes independent of their back end is a big advantage for them. And this helps any developer and then any agency be more flexible in
Mhm.
what they're trying to do in general.
It does, and it comes to, and for merchants that saves time and money, and very often it's the opportunity, the opportunity cost in all of this, right? In many ways, going to PWA is a change, but it's also the cost of not taking advantage of the experiential aspects, the conversion, the other areas there as well. So it's going to be different for every situation, which we understand, but I think it's up to us to continue to make that more compelling and more a much easier decision over time.
Okay, so from the regular front end standpoint on PWA, are we at full coverage now for GraphQL? I'm sure we're at full coverage for all the APIs, but are we at React or the GraphQL full coverage for the front end? And are the components out of Vinia there for your standard B2B or B2C site?
Yeah, so good question on the GraphQL side. So I'll start with that. B2C is functionally complete, but as anything goes, and even Rust continues to be updated, there will always be minor changes after that with each and every. And this is done typically with our quarter releases. So B2C is functionally complete. B2B is about halfway there, and with 2.4.3 coming in August, that should be functionally complete as well. So that's the goal. So you're going to have all the API coverage that you need this year, but there will be some enhancements along the way. We may look at performance optimizations, other areas that, like any other V1, will continue to enhance. But that'll get you started, and that's being used by the earliest and even current stores that are in development, and a lot of those are just becoming larger and larger every day. On the PWA side, I would say it's a slightly different story, and I think it's, to be honest, it's hard to put a percentage on what that looks like, but we've hit, in terms of the basic shopping experiences, we have a lot of what you would expect in a basic shopping experience. I think one of the biggest breakthroughs was earlier this year, when Elena kind of took the reins, but also with partnership with folks like Dave McCauley and others who've been fantastic. We've got the authenticated experiences taking in consideration, which is fresh off that GraphQL coverage. So your My Account experiences, certainly areas like multi-store, multi-currency are now readily available. And also some of the finer pieces like the mega menu. So we talk a lot about mobile and PWA. The desktop experience was brought to us by Marcin in the community as well. So we're still doing this in a way that is very much the community, still building upon the completion, really the art of really completing those basic, the way we're calling it is basically the basic experiences there, which is there. But we've got some additional work to do. We've got a couple areas that you'll see in later this year in the roadmap around dynamic blocks. We've got product recommendations was just launched recently for Venia, so we're fast following a lot of the new capabilities that are out there. And I think our goal is really to finish up this year with not only those basic experiences, but also those more complex ones that very often are just customized today or kind of set up for a separate version for that. But it's hard to say, and it's not because we're trying to be dodgy and such. Luma's not complete yet either, but like we will look at it really in terms of addressing the major needs. The questions we get are pretty common around things like server-side rendering or dynamic blocks or staging and preview and those types of areas, and those are very much in the roadmap that Elena continues to share and kind of champion with the team there. So there's something specific. We've got an answer for that one, but I would recommend really following closely with what we've done and then interacting with the community if there's a certain question or something that may not yet necessarily be there. Because on the flip side, the customization for some of these areas, and we've had some great partners that have gotten ahead with things that we eventually came around to. The customization is, I don't want to say is trivial, but a lot more straightforward if you know React as well. So it's not seen as maybe as much of a barrier to get started as it once before, especially once you get that GraphQL coverage set. And even then, we've seen people extend in advance of that. B2B is a good example. So for PWA, that's really a next year, what we call a kind of a FY22 endeavor, but we've got a lot of the UX and design work done. I'm still hopeful for something earlier than that, but ultimately, we didn't necessarily have a production. We had a demo with Brent Mill, but we didn't necessarily have a reference there either. But I'm hope as you look at components and other areas, we're hearing a lot of demand there that right now is a customization. But the GraphQL will get there. We'll get you there certainly with some of the work that we're doing for 2.4.3.
And you did answer a lot of my questions before I even asked them, and one of them was, I hope you're still going
Sorry.
to use my store name, Brent Mill, which was, I know, named after me, of course.
Of
Um,
course, of course.
so I guess B2B was going to be my next question, and you did answer it.
Yeah.
It should be ready by next year, and I think is that that's what you're saying? We should have B2B coverage, or at least some. Well, I want to back up for a second because I know, Yissa, in my last interview, we talked about the fact that Vinia shouldn't be your all go-to.
Right.
This shouldn't be your out of the box idea of what you should do for a store. This is a great example of what you can do, and it should be a framework that you take and make for your client, rather
Yep.
than just but honestly, Luma was the same thing. Luma was a great
Yep.
example of what you could do, but nobody wanted just Luma with a new logo, right? Like, no
Right.
client wants Luma with a logo. So I think
Yep.
if you look at PWA Studio as, here's a great example of what you can do, take these examples, give them to your developers, and then let's make the client experience unique to that client. I think that's a
Mhm.
better way to look at Venia, than rather than just say, hey, this is a plugin theme. Go ahead and do it. Can you comment on
It is,
that?
and it's I think that's the right way to look at it. And again, it makes discussions like percentages and things like that harder, because in reality, once you get under the hood, you realize that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, yes, we can continue to help close the gap, of course. I think we bank on our transparency on both the GraphQL coverage, component completion, et cetera, on when the right time might be for, especially for partners and merchants. And I think that's fine. But we're seeing a lot of, I think, B2B in particular. Selco from JH was our first B2B that launched well over a year ago, like well before the GraphQL coverage was done, well before any component was even a figment of an imagination. We were still focusing on some of the core fundamentals for that one, and that was quite a while back. Nestle, Yamaha, there's a few others that have already done their flavors of B2B today. And you start to see that in some of the reports that we're seeing from Built With and a couple other sources, which is encouraging, right? And so I think that supports kind of Yissi's point on that one, where it's really just a reference, and you build from it. Brent Mill, as named after you, was very much the same. It was really a demo. But really, as you look at the pieces of what we're doing, we want to have a better reference for B2B as well, especially with the demand that we're seeing, and that's what we're going to be doing next year. It's certainly not for lack of demand, but there are some key things we're working on right now. So if you join our weekly calls that we have a community, we're very much in the throes of things like global theming. And a few other areas that we have to make sure those are crisp before we start hitting B2B at some point.
Yeah, and I think helping clients understand that, this is not just your out of the box theme, but then after that, whatever the experience their users are going to have are going to be
Yep.
superior to something that isn't that 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 isn't just your vanilla Luma theme, whatever you say. And for myself, even
Yep.
speaking from experience, when PWA first came out a couple years ago, I threw it onto an AWS box, and it was like a micro or whatever their smallest box that I could get for free, and it was still performing in under 2 seconds,
Yep.
which and to be completely honest, I would give that out to Magento reps before Magento had a public Venia demo,
Right.
and they were showing that store, and then every once in a while my AWS box would stop or whatever. But
Right.
it was a great example of, hey, this is on a free server from AWS. It's the minimum
Right.
requirements. And it's loading in 2 seconds. Of course, there's no load on it, but it was like one CPU and 4
Yep.
megs of RAM or something, 4 gigs of RAM, or I don't know what it was. But anyways, it's a great example of how low resources can get
Yep.
you a high functioning store. And I never want to say to
Yep.
anybody, run your store on 1 CPU and 4 gigs of memory. Don't do that.
Right. 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 Don't do that. Brent
Right.
said, "Don't do that." No, I think, yeah. I think as we really get into this, and we don't, to be honest, we don't talk about it enough. I think the efficiency of PWA is pretty understated, right? Again, there are ways to create things that are fast, but efficient can be kind of a bit of an interesting twist. I mean, it's the same thing that like Tesla does with cars, that you almost think of what we're trying to be fast, we're trying to be efficient, we're trying to create great experiences, right? And so the efficiency piece, we've seen some early indications from some of the launches. And so with Eleganza, they were basically able to do exactly with what you've talked about. They only used about a fifth of the resources that would allow them to withstand essentially the traffic they would hit on the holidays without even flinching. The Selco example is another good one as well. So after things opened up initially with the UK, the demand for a lot of these bricks and mortar stores would often like really test the resources, well beyond Black Friday, and essentially the bursts of traffic that were hitting. The Selco example didn't even flinch, and for that one. So there's an efficiency and a resiliency here around PWA that is probably often understated, especially if you're thinking about this from a merchant perspective, where it's like, wow, this is a big change. I get it. Like, okay, this venue thing makes a lot of sense, but those are all very important when it comes to it. And again, we probably could do more talking about those aspects of that you brought up. So I'm glad you did.
Yeah, and I think some exciting things, and I don't want to get too technical, but if you think of a CDN, some of the exciting things that are out there are the ability to deploy your application on the edge. So like in your local, at the end of your local distribution network, right? You could deploy a PWA that's in your zone that then connects back to your central, to your back end, and your front end experience is going to be inherently faster because you're in that environment that's local to you, even though the store is centralized in one place.
Absolutely. I mean, this was a kind of a premise that Zetland had talked about very early, where we're delivering experiences at the edge, right? I think some of the talks we had were, life from the edge, and so I think there's a lot there that I think we're seeing, especially as this technology has matured. But those are the types of experiences that we're unlocking with some of the work that we've seen. Certainly with the partners, but we're also doing our best to bake that into our own cloud as well, because these are all advantages that make it easier, make it faster, make it more resilient.
Yeah, Life from the Edge. I think that would make a great movie with James Zetland and Tom Cruise, where they would both do their own stunts. James would do his own demo stunts on PWA, and then Tom Cruise would jump off of large buildings.
For sure, James would always do his own stunts. I would, yeah, for sure, no connection.
It would make a great movie.
For sure.
Yeah. So, so let's move on to like, what is your role with Adobe now? And I think that you're changing a little bit, or you're moving up or around and having fun. I don't want to
somewhere having fun. Having fun is right. No, I think having fun's right. I think, so again, my role, my team has really grown in terms of their responsibilities. Again, we're doing way more than just PWA. You've probably heard a lot about live search. Certainly recently at Summit, you've seen a lot of work around product recommendations. We are working more closely with our peers in the Adobe organization, right? And so you'll see this with the work that we're doing, where it may feel like PWA, but it's really a strategy to create composable commerce across the way. And so we've had some launches to date, like your TiVos and Sazeracs of the world, that you may take a look at it and go, wait, that's the Venya shopping cart. And so there's a lot of work that we're doing that I think is really starting to grow and be beyond that. And my team's focus is also on things like content and authoring, right? Page Builder is very much at the front and center, but there are content and authoring solutions across Adobe as well. So we work and collaborate on kind of what those experiences are at the right fit, at the right target market, at the right kind of user base with each one of these. And so we're a little bit more involved in that one, but we still stay true to our mission, certainly with respect to kind of Magento open source, but also Adobe Commerce. And I think we've grown, and I think with some of the announcements and some of the things that have been talked about this year, that's given us a bit of an identity between the two. But the reality is we're flexible, and what my team works on is really flexes in and out of those quite a bit for that one. So yeah, my role is kind of grown. My team's fantastic. Again, I mentioned Elena. She is all things PWA now, kind of growing out of kind of what you've seen with Page Builder. fantastic teams like Macaulay's and others who have really doing all the work behind the scenes with their community each and every week to get this done. And then we're moving as fast as we can, but doing it in the open for that one. And it's more than just PWA though, but it really starts to span into those larger considerations. And then some of the new feature functionality that's happening that still needs to be part of this kind of headless or kind of composable world that we're part of. So my team is kind of front and center of it, and having done this probably longer than I'd like to admit, it's a pretty exciting time. Certainly to be in commerce, certainly to be in doing what we're doing, but it's also a time of fluidity and change, which may not necessarily be for the faint of heart, but I love it. So I love what we're doing.
So you did mention Magento Association, and I did enjoy. Maybe I saw your talk. Did you talk at Magento Connect? I think anyways, I enjoyed the last
yeah.
Magento Connect talk or conference or online conference. Just tell us a little bit, if you could tell us a little bit about the association and what is your
Sure.
role with them now?
Yeah, so my role is a little bit different than probably what you've seen and known of Ben's and others. It's really that of a liaison, and of course I had to look up, like what does that really entail? But we've had folks in the past who've served this role of kind of being that voice of Adobe inside of the association. So I'm not necessarily a voting member or et cetera, but really someone who has been involved, as you know, with the community for quite some time. And with all the changes, I wanted to make sure personally that both organizations were well connected and stay connected between the two. But we've got some great folks on the developer experience side within Adobe, like Jonathan Roeder, who you've probably seen and met in the past. They're really responsible for how essentially the Magento Association, the ecosystem community, really can then work and really grow inside the larger Adobe one. And we've seen some really interesting examples around Firefly, but even the work that we're doing, kind of has a home in both. Right, which is ultimately the goal. It can sometimes be daunting in some cases because it is a change for some. But the Magento Association though is that heartbeat though of the community, and the several 100,000 strong, and really those who really are carrying the torch for what open commerce is all about. And so I'm in many ways I'm excited about some of the clarity that we've had this year on that, but. I'm kind of in between, kind of stitching and kind of connecting the right folks so that we do have that continuity with some of the change here, and looking at examples that are out there to make sure that we are learning even outside of Magento and taking advantage of this into our future, and doing it very thoughtfully, and doing it again with at least the knowledge and the care that I know that Ben had done for a long time, but that I know the community looks for as well. So that's what I'm up to, at least with regard to that. And again, we've got some great folks over there that Josh and Slava, Sonia is now involved as well, and Guido and folks. They're doing a great job, and they're looking at it more than just any one in particular category of that. But you probably only see bits and pieces across it. But I've been very impressed.
Yeah. Can you? So I was invited in 2019 to that first Adobe Summit when Magento was introduced, or that finalization of the purchase was taken care of, and we did have some specific small groups that we met in, where we met some of the people from AEM and some of the open source projects that Adobe has done over a long period of time. And I think one of the things that's happened in community, and that it's always happened even when eBay bought Magento, was that Magento or that whoever bought, like Adobe's going to crush the community, and Adobe isn't open source, and Adobe's this commercial product. And I know at the time I was very refreshed to see that there's this already vibrant open source community on a number of other products. But can you just give us your feedback and maybe some reassurance that, hey, this community is still going, and it's vibrant, and it's open, and it's open source?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So and that's very much part of Jonathan Roeder's mission, right? And I think you've seen this with help from Sherry and probably other familiars as well on really what stitching that together looks like. Because you're right. I think many folks didn't realize that there's so much that's happening and has happened with AEM that is open source, and that's helped I think become a very nice introduction as we work more and more with those teams on very specific things like components to how they've been able to bring to life a lot of these with like really large customers, right? And so we're pretty impressed with that. But open source has been I think a good glue and a good connector. We continue to hear the business side of why that's important, and I continue again as my role as connector and kind of liaison, really pressing like this is what makes this unique, and there are ways to grow and grow and accelerate and again find that bridge between the two, because so many partners like yourself and others are also interested in moving up and understanding how this works together as well. And I think that's really important. And so I think what we're doing, how we're doing it, I think is going to be key to all of this. But I think there is a lot more open source happening on the Adobe side. If you've seen the Dev Live events and others, then probably people probably see on a regular basis, especially if you're looking just at commerce. But it's up to us to kind of find ways to cross-pollinate that. The Firefly example is probably a good one. The work we're doing in Venue is probably another one as well. There's some open source work on how to get Venue wired up for AEM and some work that's happening between those. And it's really just a matter of kind of us finding our point of view inside of a much larger ecosystem and finding ways that we can really capitalize on that. I think there's more work to do. I think a lot of this comes down to experimentation, and I think that's always been the hallmark of our community. Someone who can take an idea, stitch it together, create something new, maybe better yet, launch it for a customer and say, hey, look what I did with this. This is so much easier, and look at the experience that I produced. I think we've got some work to continue to, I think, encourage kind of the stitching together all these things that people are seeing. And I think that's going to help tell us a better story on how these come together, certainly with open source as a piece of this, but then enhanced as needed, with other areas of the Adobe portfolio. So it's pretty exciting, but it is a time of growth. But for those who are kind of seeing both sides of it, it is encouraging.
Yeah, and I think one of our missions for 2022 would be that we get a Magento/Adobe Commerce product into the sneaks and get that up
nice.
there. But there was eight different sneaks this year, and it would be great to see next year a Magento it'll be an Adobe Commerce specific sneak where we show off our innovations. One of the things I miss about Magento was the innovations lab, where I felt like it was a lot more open to us as agencies or as thinkers or thought leaders or whatever you want to call us, where you would come up with an idea, and then what I would do is I would tell my team, hey, let's try this, let's get it into innovations and see what happens. If anything, we've at least tried something and people have learned something about what Magento can do, and that's a part you really have to hold on to. And keeping the community involved in that is really what makes Magento special and what makes open source special. So let's
totally agree. I think that's a goal. Let's make that a mission. I would love for Dan Levy to announce some sort of interesting demo at Sneaks next year for sure. But I think, we felt the same way. There were some really great ones this year. And I think that's part of also both sides really understanding the full potential on that one. Workday, which was acquired even more recently than us, had a really good integration they showed there. But I think as we look at the full breadth of the Adobe portfolio, there's so much opportunity in the creative side. We talk regularly to those folks, but very often we're focused on the critical platform pieces, but also areas like DevX where, we've got some work on this coming later this year, but imagine the tooling that we're using and thinking about improving that designer developer workflow. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And as agencies, there's a great opportunity to improve that and showcase that in things like Sneaks and such. So those are pretty huge, and I can't wait to see some of those in person. I've never been to the summit myself yet. Hopefully next year for that one, but it is massive to see the kind of scale. And I think for folks who've seen it firsthand, it's like wow. But it's up to us, like your folks like yourself and others who've been in the community for a while, to help people kind of help guide them through some of the growth that is there. And that's certainly what I try to do every day. It may not necessarily be my title and such, but really finding ways to connect and make sure that there's growth between kind of the old and the new.
Yeah, and I think an extremely technical explanation to Dan Levy would help us would would entertain the crowd a lot more, just like some of those other ones where he was just like, huh?
Yeah. His expression was like every time I describe what I do for a living to my to my family, where it's like they like, oh, you do web design, right? Yeah, I don't. Okay, okay, that's fine. That's
Yeah, that's
yes,
fine.
yes, yes, yes.
All right, so just a little bit on the community still. I saw
Yep.
that you were at a meetup in Austin with Commerce Party. How is
Yeah,
how is re-engaging with the community going in person?
it was amazing actually. So it kind of happened, yeah, and Karen and team have really kind of led the charge on kind of what the local commerce community has looked like. So Dave McCauley and I just kind of on a whim signed up and went down there, and there's about 50 of us or so with the Shipper HQ team and a couple, even other partners, other ecosystems involved. And it was just the first time a lot of us, the first time I'd seen Dave in over a year, first time I've seen Karen and Quentin and folks, and it was great. I think it was a preview of what to expect, and maybe some of the other meetups and other areas that we might be maybe more motivated or maybe even find ways this fall to do. And I'm starting to see this in kind of smaller pockets, because I don't think next year is next year. It just feels so far away. And for us, it was really encouraging. Just great to see people shake hands, have a beverage with folks, and that's always been the lifeblood of what we do. It's always the work is the work, but like conversations like this around like, hey, how does this work together, how does this, and kind of getting beyond the slides, is I think is very key, both from how we work together but also how we listen. And I think that's the part that despite all best efforts, I think in person, the listening aspect and really how we're doing this and shaping all of us, that not even just Magento, Adobe, et cetera, but really commerce and the opportunity ahead. It was pretty encouraging. So I'm excited about the next one. I think she's planning something pretty sizable in the fall as well around the ACL. That fully planning to attend, but it was super thankful, and again recognize all the hard work that Karen and team kind of going out there a bit. And we had bad weather, by the way. She had to remove it last minute, and it's been like torrential downpours here in Austin, but we did it, and it was great. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, my first in-person conference this year was in Austin, and it was about, I don't know, 6 weeks ago now. But
Yeah.
Texas is open, and it was a really fun event, and I felt safe. They had it well set up, and of course now everybody's getting their vaccines, and things
Yeah.
are moving much better, and things are really open. But I agree. Maybe you could help me answer this question. We've been pushing for this conference in Minneapolis on like January 4th. Nobody ever wants to come up here. Like Philip Jackson, I say, hey, come up to Minneapolis. We're going to do January 4th. It's going to be great. And he's like, what? No. And then he hangs up. I don't understand why
Right.
people aren't on board with this.
So we learned this with the Super Bowls back in the day when they were up in Detroit and such. It just is not the same feel in January as it might be this time of year. Now, talk to us in like August, where we basically have an extra August here in Texas. Like we're fair game. Let's do it, for sure. But yeah,
Well, just a small
timing
comment.
is always good.
We did have a Super Bowl just recently, and we
Yeah.
were the only Super Bowl to ever have snowmobile racing down major inner city
All right. All
streets
right.
with jumping and flips. So if anything, and we have an indoor stadium, so that helps.
It does
But if
help.
anything,
Yes.
Minneapolis can put on a cold weather event. And of course, I'm joking about putting on an event in Minneapolis in January. However, what I am trying to promote now, and all joking aside, is a hackathon / unconference in Orlando, Florida in January of 2022.
Hmm. I've heard about this. I've
Yes,
heard about
and
this.
yes, I would love to get Adobe on board with the hackathon, and then do an unconference just like they do in Cologne,
Yeah.
Germany. Cologne, Germany, the best smelling town in Germany, where we can bring the community together and get
Yep.
some. And I think the unconference format makes it completely open to anybody from any community that
Mhm.
wants to come and join. My last unconference was in 2019 in Germany, and the Shopware folks showed up. And they had
Yeah.
a bunch of
For
topics
sure.
that they put up there to present. And I think it's just a great format. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It's all
Yeah.
self-directed. And then if anybody knows, there's Disney World in Orlando. And I don't know
True.
why more people haven't promoted this idea of a Magento event in Orlando, Florida in January 2022.
I love the idea. I will have my people talk to your people about that one. But I love the idea of folks getting together now that things are a little bit more settled. I love the idea of innovation, hackathons, all the things that really have been the lifeblood of what we're doing for that one. And yeah, Orlando, who can go wrong with it? But you're right. I can't think of, other than maybe some trainings and some workshops here and there, like nothing, like we really haven't taken full advantage of that area of the country yet with really what it could bring. So
yeah, we've always done our Magento U workshop in Orlando in February.
Yep.
And that
Yeah.
that's always been. In 2020 we had our last one, and I think that's where we did a PWA course at that one, and that's when I decided, hey, I'm just going to see if I can get PWA running on my local machine. It can't be this hard, and it wasn't very hard. I got it up and running while I sat there. So
for
absolutely,
sure.
yeah, it's a great. Anyways, so let's close things up here. We went way over like normal, and what sort of books are you reading right now? What do you get, anything interesting on the podcast front?
Yeah, probably not as many books as I should. I think on my list, I definitely want to read Scott Belsky's Messy Middle. I think there's a lot of like really good product strategy that he's continuing to champion with all the change that are out there now. It just so happens that he, and I just found out that this being part of Adobe, but like he's doing some really interesting thought leadership in that area that I think is very, very applied and well beyond just any processes. And so I think that's probably on the list. There's a few other ones I'm thinking about as well, but I think, for as far as like, recommendations and such, I would say, let's, find ways to get involved with the products, get involved with the community, get involved with the association, find ways to start some experimentation with some of the things that Jonathan and Sherry are talking about in the Adobe world. I'm definitely more of a hands-on person than and so learning and kind of getting your hands dirty on some of the things that are out there, much like you did in Orlando, is a great way to get plugged in and start asking those questions. I think what we need to do now is really start to kind of fill our minds with the questions, and really like when those live conversations happening and when we start getting together in these meetups, like let's talk, let's think through some things together, let's build some great experiences. So that would be my take. But as far as like day to day, like get involved. There's some great readings out there. Podcast. This one, of course, is a good one. Future Commerce is also great as well. So I listened to a few of those and some product ones in general, but definitely more involved in the experimentation and just playing with things as much as I can.
And if you had one good action item that a merchant could take away from this episode, what would you tell them?
Good question. I would ask him to be a bit fearless, which and what I mean by fearless, I would say, there's a lot of there are a lot of options today as a merchant, and I think change and some of the changes that we're talking about with PWA, but even Magento, Adobe, etc. Like it can be daunting, right? Because we know we're just one of many conversations or decisions that merchants have to think there. We understand that, but I think be fearless with the potential that you're trying, and really to think about the problems that you're trying to solve for. And I think what you'll find is there is probably somebody who's already done it, a great partner who's probably helped, a series of developers who've maybe put together some experiments that have kind of got that started, which I think is good. And I think that then drives that next step. And so once you're fearless, you understand what that might be, then you have that next conversation of, okay, what are we going to do about it? Maybe PWA is less daunting than you thought. There may be small ways to start off with some A/B testing, maybe a pop-up store, maybe so I think that's what that would be the key takeaway from that, and know that we've got great teams behind the scenes here. We've got a fantastic community that's always championing us, and we've got a lot of potential, a lot of work, to do together in this one. So that would be my takeaway. That the second one, if I was to add, it was just really just getting involved. There's a clear difference with those who've kind of really who are bought in on the concept but haven't quite taken that step on what it might mean for them to kind of experiment, spin up your own instance, play around with the demo. And again, that's just it's all about informing that next step, but it's okay to be a little bit fearless.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting involved with Magento, with the Magento Association, and there's a Slack channel for the Magento community that you can ask questions about. There's a community engineering channel, and there's all kinds of ways to get answers for anything you need in the PWA world and in the Adobe world in general, in the Magento world. So there's so many places that you can go, and as I tell our developers every day, ask questions. If you don't know who to ask me, but ask questions. Ask it on Twitter. There's all kinds of places that you can get educated and motivated and move up. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely great.
We're always there, right? We've got weeklies specifically around PWA that Elena and Dave do a great job in leading. We're always out there in those channels like you'd mentioned, and we're at a point now where the community is actually helping solve some of the questions themselves, so it doesn't rely upon the small but mighty teams behind the scenes that do that. And that's where we wanted to be. It's a different story now than it was a couple years ago. But you're right. I think there's great access, and that's always been one of the best parts about community. But there's great access to the questions you might have, and no question is too silly. We want to make sure that everybody understands, again, from a developer, partner, and merchant perspective.
Yeah, and the beauty of the open source is that the community is there. It's not just 1,000 developers that Adobe has or whatever the number is.
Yep.
There's 100,000 people behind it that are looking to get answers. So
Yep,
and
for
find
sure.
solutions. So I think that's
and help you with that. Yep.
All right. So just as
village.
we finish things out, if you could give yourself one shameless plug about anything you'd like.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Probably I would say get involved. I think we've talked a lot. I find ways, if you're interested in what we're doing, PWA Studio.io. You too can spin up your own version using our own Magento 2 instance on Venya on your local in just a matter of minutes. So play around with it. Even if you haven't done development in a long time, you'll find it to be pretty straightforward. And then get involved, ask the questions. Don't assume, right? A lot of folks will assume. They go, oh, what about this, this, and this? Like, reach out to us. We're pretty easy to find. But the plug would be just get involved. We want to help. We care, deeply about, the success of certainly the product portfolio, but really the community and in our continued, evolution here with Adobe. And there's a pretty exciting future ahead with all this coming together. But don't make assumptions. Reach out. Let us know. Let's talk. Meetups, things like that. We're always willing to chat about it. So let us know how we can help.
Yeah, and you're hosting our meetup in January of 2022 in Minneapolis, so I appreciate that.
Very good. I'll go buy. I need to go buy some new clothes, I think, for that. So for sure. But I'll sure, of course.
All right. Well, all kidding aside, thank you very much for being here.
Of course.
Really, this has been very informative, and I appreciate it and hope to have you again soon.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Brent. Really appreciate it.
Bye. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. This episode has been sponsored by the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions, an AWS Select Consulting partner, Erway Corporation. Forward together. Thank you again for listening. My name is Brent Peterson, and it has been my pleasure to be your host today. Please rate and subscribe to Talk Commerce. New shows out every week.